Each man's death diminishes me, for I am involved in mankind. Therefore, send not to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. John Donne. The need to control, an itchy blanket of creeping anxiety that affects pretty much the entire human race. The way I see it, all of life can be categorized into two main groups: things you can control and things you can't. One might find it ironic, then, to consider that no matter how under control things are in people's lives, there's something looming on the horizon that offers no choice at all: our own mortality. We cannot simply choose to not die, because dying is inevitable. There is no way to cheat Father Time, because eventually and without fail he sends death to collect each and every one of us. I know, starting out this episode real bright and happy. Believe me though, it's not all doom and gloom, I promise. In fact, some of the best art in the world is a result of the struggle of the artist to creatively come to grips with the ever-approaching adversary of death. That brings us to today's topic, this painting, as well as the brilliant artist behind it. This is Wheatfield with Crows, and its painter is none other than the larger-than-life Vincent van Gogh. My goal with today's episode of On Thin Ice is to discuss the man behind this painting and his life, as well as the thought processes that governed the creation of Wheatfield with Crows. I'll also, as always, be offering my own personal insights to the painting's potential meanings and messages. Before I get into all that, though, thank you for watching, and I do hope you enjoy. To kick things off, let's get one thing straight. Who is Vincent van Gogh? In the simplest of terms, he was a Dutch artist who was part of the post-impressionist movement of the 19th century. Despite his Dutchness, he did most of his painting in France, which is also where he spent a good deal of his life. That's Vincent at a glance, but honestly, it's quite a disservice to his character to include his name so close to the word simple, because simple he was most certainly not. He led a very complex life, and was a very complex and deeply troubled person. I won't touch on everything today, but what I will do is go over the parts of his life that are relevant to this specific painting, Wheatfield with Crows. As I mentioned, Vincent is considered a post-impressionist artist. This is because his work, while still holding on to several vestiges of the impressionist movement prevalent in the art world at the time, made several key departures from other impressionist techniques and styles. His technique mostly involved quick stabbing brushstrokes and lots of paint, which is known as impasto. Another interesting influence on Vincent's work that not many people know about is actually the art of Japan. See, Japanese art often employs a forced, flat perspective in order to create negative space, which helps the audience focus on the subject of the art. This is in stark contrast to the Impressionist approach, in which the snapshot moment is the subject, thus having the effect of, ostensibly, favoring no particular subject in the painting. All these techniques and influences are on full display in Wheatfield with Crows. The period of time in Vincent's life that is most relevant for the sake of this video is the stretch of years leading up to his death, beginning in 1888 and ending in 1890. These years saw Vincent at his most productive, as he finished roughly 200 paintings during these 2 years. Of those paintings, 28 of them depict some kind of wheat or cornfields, meaning that more than one in every 10 paintings was a landscape painting of a field. Many of these 28 depict the same wheat field, one that Vincent would paint many times over near the end of his life. Speaking of the end of his life, in 1890, Vincent van Gogh would die of a gunshot wound he sustained in that very field outside Auvers, France. And his body is buried there, right alongside his brother Theo, who died shortly after Vincent's passing. With the necessary context for Vincent's life in mind, let's return to Wheatfield with Crows. The first thing I'd like to discuss is the turbulence of the scene depicted here. The clouds are stormy. The crows are almost formless as their bodies blur into squiggly black lines. The crop of the field is being whipped into a frenzy by the wind, the harbinger of the approaching storm. It's an overall disquieting and somewhat uncomfortable scene, as the viewer wonders if the murder of crows is, in fact, flying in their direction. Devoid though it is of human figures, one cannot but be powerfully aware of the painter-spectator as imminent victim of the crow's menacing flight. The lack of other human figures may also invoke the temporary and impermanent nature of man compared to the world around him. The perspective is distorted to increase the sense of scale in the work, making the sea of wheat seem to stretch onwards into eternity. He even said as much in a letter to Theo, in which he describes his feelings when beholding the fields of crops in the French countryside. The eternity of fields stretching out before the viewer in conjunction with the scary weather on the horizon tells us just what kind of mental state Vincent was likely in. He was contemplating mortality, and he was scared. Such a thought must have really rattled his cage based on what we're seeing here. We, the audience, are powerless to stop this storm or the flight of the crows, just as death has the final laugh over us all. There is also a religious angle to the painting. Vincent was a deeply religious man, and he held strong beliefs about the Christian afterlife. In the New Testament book of Mark, in the King James Bible, we read the following verse: "As soon as the crop is ripe, he plies the sickle, because harvest time is come." Death is inevitable, true, just like crops will inevitably age and ripen. However, that is the natural course of things, and it is nothing to fear, but rather a necessary step in the continuation of the rest of creation. This idea is not uniquely Christian, as it is also championed by Stoic thinkers such as Marcus Aurelius. In his Meditations, Marcus writes the following comments on death, which I find relevant to my arguments. What dying is, and that if you look at it in the abstract and break down your imaginary ideas of it by logical analysis, you realize that it's nothing but a process of nature, which only children can be afraid of. And not only a process of nature, but a necessary one. If it doesn't hurt the individual elements to change continually into one another, why are people afraid of all of them changing and separating? It's a natural thing, and nothing natural is evil. Thus, we see that perhaps impending death was not purely negative in Vincent's mind as he wrought this painting. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, we must discuss nature and Van Gogh's relationship with it. It was never Vincent's goal to accurately reproduce nature with his work, but rather to reflect his own interpretation of it. So the ways in which nature appears varies depending on the stage of life Vincent was in at the time. On a surface level, then, Wheatfield with crows is frenzied. So Vincent must have been flustered and shaken too, just like the wind-whipped crop. Is it really just fear that informs this portrayal, though? Upon closer inspection of some of Vincent's letters, as well as research that has been done into his character and life's work, the answer to that question is likely no. He wrote to Theo of his desire to, quote, abandon life amid the radiance of this nature. He had great reverence for the French countryside, and it was this reverence that perhaps altered his view of death as being rapturous instead of dreadful. And die he did, as will we all. But that's not exactly a bad thing, because to die is to be human. To die means the existence of its opposite as well. To die is to have lived. What do you think about Wheatfield with crows? Does it terrify or inspire you? Or is it just another painting? Leave a comment down below. I look forward to reading them. If you made it this far, why not like and subscribe? I've loved producing this show thus far, and your support helps motivate me to continue honing my craft and making more episodes. Finally, if you're interested in the subjects of death and its symbols, you should watch my recent video about a book that is filled to the brim with all that good stuff, and maybe have a therapist on speed dial. I'm Philip, this has been On Thin Ice, and again, thank you for watching.